أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وصحابته ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. اللهم لا علم إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم افتح علينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الكرام، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. الحمد لله. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, يوم لا ينفع مال ولا بنون إلا من أتى الله بقلب سليم. On that day, which means the day of judgment, nothing will benefit the human being, neither wealth nor children, only the one who brings to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a sound heart. The sound heart, or al-qalb al-salim, is a heart that's free from the defects and the spiritual blemishes. So this heart actually is considered the spiritual heart and not the physical heart, although the spiritual heart is centered in the physical heart. One of the extraordinary things about the modern era is that we're finding out things about the heart that were previously unknown to peoples who went before us. Although we can see within the ancient traditions, for instance in the Chinese tradition, in Chinese medicine, the heart houses what's known as Shen, which is the spirit. And the Chinese characters for thinking, thought, love, intending to listen, and virtue all contain the ideogram for heart. So the ancient Chinese knew that. Also, in almost every culture in the world, people use metaphors that deal with the heart. We call people in English hard-hearted people, people who have hard hearts. In other words, they're cruel people. Somebody who has a cold heart or somebody who has a warm heart. We talk about people wearing their hearts on their sleeves. In other words, they don't hide their emotions, they don't hide their states from other people. We talk about also the idea of he affected me in my heart or in my core. In fact, the English word core, which means innermost, in Arabic the equivalent is called lub, actually comes from the Latin word which means heart. So the core of the human being is the human heart. And also the word courage is from the same root word. So courage being centered in the heart. The most ancient Indo-European word for heart means that which leaps. And there's an idea of the heart beating or leaping in the breast of man. And also people say, for instance, that their heart skipped a beat when they saw somebody. People whose hearts, when they're in love, they often express things in terms of the heart. He stole my heart, or she stole my heart. So many, many metaphors that are used in terms of the human heart. Now the ancients were aware of spiritual diseases of the heart, and this is certainly at the essence of the Islamic teaching. In fact, one of the first things that the Quran immediately sets out is to define three types of people: the mu'minun, the kafirun, and the munafiqun. The mu'minun are people whose hearts are alive, and the verse that indicates that is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَوَمَنْ كَانَ مَيْتًا أَوْ مَيِّتًا فَأَحْيَيْنَاهُ وَجَعَلْنَا لَهُ نُورًا يَمْشِي بِهِ فِي النَّاسِ. The one who was dead. In other words, they were dead, their hearts were dead. And also, and so they were revived with faith, and then they were given a light that they walk with it amongst human beings. Also the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, which is الفرق بين الذي يذكر الله والذي لا يذكر الله كالفرق بين الحي والميت. The difference between the one who remembers Allah and the one who doesn't remember Allah is like the difference between the living and the dead. So the mu'min is somebody whose heart is alive. The kafir is somebody whose heart is dead. And the munafiq is somebody who has a disease or a sickness in the heart. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٍ فَزَادَهُمُ اللَّهُ مَرَضًا. In their hearts is a disease, and so they were increased in their disease. And this is also in accordance with another verse that says, فَلَمَّا زَاغَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ أَزَاغَهُمُ اللَّهُ. When their hearts deviated, Allah made them deviate further. So when somebody turns away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala causes them to divert even further, to deviate even further from the truth. Now, the physical heart, which is centered slightly to the left of the human being, and it's interesting also that the Arabic language itself is a movement from left to right. Some of the people of Ishara indicated that writing should be towards the heart. In other words, the whole purpose of writing is to affect the heart. This is also the reason why the tawaf, or the circumambulation around the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is done with the left side facing the house. Some of the scholars, they said, because the heart inclines towards the left, and so the purpose is that the heart is inclining towards the Kaaba, or towards that centrality of the divinity in the life of man. Now, the actual physical heart, which is beating in our breast, beats at about 100,000 times a day. It's pumping 2 gallons of blood per minute and over 100 gallons per hour. If you actually took 100 gallons of water and moved them physically with your body from one place to another, by the end of it you'd be quite exhausted. And yet this human heart is pumping 2 gallons of blood per minute, over 100 gallons per hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, for an entire lifetime. The vascular system that it's sending this life-giving blood is over 60,000 miles long. In other words, more than 2 times the circumference of the earth. So the blood is actually being forced through the body over 60,000 miles of vascular system in the human body. Now, one of the interesting things also about the heart is that we know that it actually starts beating before the brain is formed, which means that the heart has its own beat. In other words, the heart itself begins to beat without any central nervous system. Now, the dominant theory is that the central nervous system is what's controlling the entire human being from the brain. And yet we know now that the nervous system does not initiate the beat of the heart, that it's actually self-initiated, and we also know, or we would say initiated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also we know now that the entire heart, all of the connections to the brain can be severed in a heart transplant, and another heart can be put into a human being's body, and the heart continues to beat without any connection to the brain whatsoever, because we cannot regenerate nerve cells. So the fact that the heart itself is not only the center of the human being, but it is not beating because of the brain, because of the central nervous system. Now, another interesting thing about the brain is that the human being, there are many actually people that think that the brain is also the center of consciousness. And yet, the Quran very clearly states, لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا. They have hearts that they're not able to think with, or they're not able to understand with. And so the understanding from that, according to the Muslims, is that the center of the intellect, the center of human consciousness, is the heart and not the brain itself. And it's only recently that human beings have realized that there are over 40,000 neurons in the heart. In other words, there are actually cells in the heart that are communicating, and there's understood to be a two-way communication between the brain and the heart. In other words, the brain sends the heart messages, but the heart is also sending the brain message. And these things are only recently being discovered. There was a study done by 2 physiologists in the 70s, John and Beatrice Lacey, that found that the brain actually sent messages to the heart, but the heart did not automatically obey the messages. Sometimes it speeded up, and other times it slowed down. indicating that the heart itself has its own type of intelligence. Now, the brain gets signals from the heart that reach the amygdala, the thalamus, and the cortex, which relates to emotions. The cortex, or the neocortex, relates to learning and reasoning. And these are only recently discovered, and we don't fully understand them. But what we do know is that the heart is an extremely sophisticated organ, and it's also, according to the hadith, it's a source of knowledge. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that wrong action is what irritates the heart.